wretched space rat, your path is far from over. For you see, the most horrifying truth is yet to be revealed. My dear Lombax, I am your father's accountant. Did that do it? Did that
Hey,
Spaceballs.
your mind? Let that just roll around for a bit. Oh, now, come, find me in the core of this sector, and let us end what we began. Vorselon out.
Like, that's not the exact line from Spaceballs, but they were
The
definitely
spirit is
thinking
there.
Spaceballs with that one.
Anyway, what happens after you collect all 40 zonies? I don't remember if it's also influenced by the gold votes or not, but at least with the zonies. Lord Vorselon asks you for a final challenge. It's literally a post-final boss challenge, you know, for you to conquer. It's actually very unique. The franchise has never really done something like this before. And I don't think it ever did ever since.
I'm guessing again, since they intended for this to be the end, they figured, why don't we try something new in case people were hungering for more?
Plot-wise, Vorselon just drops out of it, so yeah, they kinda had to resolve that.
You know, I forget if we mentioned it during our final thoughts part, but I do think one thing that was kind of weird about the game that centers around time travel was that they don't work with it nearly as much as I think they ought to have. For as much the big deal that it's made, anyway. Like, yeah, it's used throughout, but there are some segments where if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't be able to even tell that we're technically time traveling.
To be fair, we do start immediately in the Great Clock anyway, so I can still see it, even if it's not used as much as a plot device. It's more about a story of preventing time travel rather than abusing it, using and abusing it. So it's a bit unique in what it does.
I guess I'll say that, like, you know, again, a lot of the critiques that we did have do vary with the knowledge you have. Like, obviously, with this not being the end, you know, some may not apply as much. But again, it's all something that you can only know relatively speaking. And yeah, I know some may say, well, technically, almost anything could be the end of a series. Like, yeah, sure, but it is quite telling that they wanted this to actually be the end of the series, though, as opposed to, you know, even them not knowing it.
As a final challenge, it's clearly meant to be stacked on because it doesn't really take too much time for you to deal with things and Vorselon himself. You literally just have this turret section, and if I recall correctly, immediately after you get to fight Vorselon again, and it culminated into an escape sequence with a timer. And now we're doing the Metroid thing.
Beautiful. Still, though, sadly, you're no Ridley.
Vorselon doesn't even come back in the other games as far as I know, so yeah. I don't wonder if they even meant it for him to be a recurring new bad guy or not.
I'll admit, if it were me, I probably would have just had Nefarious come back for a final rematch for the post-game. Like, now, don't get me wrong, it's nice that Vorselon is along here so that we can resolve what's going on with him once and for all, but I would have probably just included him on whatever post-game venture was going on with Nefarious. Of course, if I really had complete control of this, I probably would have made it that the post-game was kind of similar to Mega Man Star Force 2, where you actually have to deal with a bad future where Nefarious actually won, essentially, and fix that up.
Teleportation, yeah. Honestly, the real closure that I think probably would have, you know, would have been better to have the whole sense of finality that this has, would have been to track down Lawrence and actually defeat him instead, because otherwise he too just drops out. As soon as Farius dies, he just fucks off and we don't know what happened to him.
Which, I'll admit, I feel like there are multiple things to take from that. Like, maybe he figured it was finally time to call it quits, or maybe he was happy that he was finally free.
The next game immediately, not retcon, yeah, kind of retcons immediately to have said that he came back to get the Nefarious remains so he could get repaired. So again, we will also see Lawrence one more time.
In which case, kind of begs the question why he didn't just use a magnet to take Nefaris' remains with him. But again, to be fair, I'll give that explanation the benefit of a doubt that they legit didn't know that that was going to happen. So I won't hold the writers on All for One to that standard, since, you know, obviously, look, when you have to do a retcon because, you know, the story ends up going further than you expected, I can maybe get why your back may be in a bit of a corner in that regard. I will say also, though, however, you could arguably have probably just said that Nefaris got sucked into some black hole and then got spat out in another world where the inhabitants put him together or something, worshipping him as like some god or something.
To be fair, that's just, you know, mishmashing stuff that already happened, Jova. Getting sucked into a black hole, that's what happened to Tachyon, and, you know, getting sort of a, you know, way to actually rebuild his empire, that's what happened with the Fongoids.
Oh, I absolutely understand. It just goes into my point that, well, again, it's like, I'm not too sore about the writers maybe kind of doing a bit of a shrug equivalent of a plot explanation for Nefaris' survival and what Lawrence was up to, because I get it, you know, like, obviously when the mindset was to end a series, sometimes your explanation for continuing it in the next title is gonna come off maybe a bit constrained.
It also really depends on the writing team, because again, I think I mentioned already, but just to mention, Jack Free did still manage to have a more proper sense of finality while still leaving the room open for stuff that eventually happened, The Lost Frontier and X Combat Racing, you know. But the way Free ended, that really felt actually, you know, having proper sense of finality with the remaining potential bad guys being defeated and, you know, more prosperity coming to that future. But anyway, here we are.
In anticipation of our battle, I've taken the liberty of upgrading my suit. Prepare for terror unlike you have ever
Just a fancy
find
term
it-
to say that, you know, it's a proper final boss.
Yeah, it's kind of his shtick. Alright, Vorselon, let's end this once and for all.
I've gone through much tragedy and horror, but it's finally time to put an end to you, assuming this takes place after the end of the story,
Yes,
chronologically.
As far as I understand, yes. And as
Also,
you
I
can see,
find it
this is one case where the Rhino actually gets put to a good use.
I find it funny how, for as much trouble as we've had with the brightness, in this particular area they choose to up the darkness instead, to the point where it does that thing I really don't like in games where it feels like you have to turn up the brightness just to be able to appreciate a model fully.
Yeah, okay, that's the thing that, wait, there's a character here named Rhino, you said, right?
No,
The
that's the name of
weapon
the
that I'm
gun.
using, and it's spelled
Oh, the weapon.
Remember, it's an acronym from the first game. Reap you a new one.
So yeah, now
Okay.
Because I thought you said that there was a characters there, and I thought, why didn't Paul Giamatti play him in the movie?
There you go. There's Vorselon done. He's dead.
we literally just blew up his head too. Wow. Like
Yeah, I think we need to get out.
Ratchet's not playing around, yo.
Nice bit of
Until
beat
this
it.
is when this-
At least Samus had something like, say, 2 minutes or something. Also, my floors are clipping through the... Oh, never mind.
I guess Vorselon considered, you know, just in case, I'm not going to be fair about the time. Like, maybe he has something that can transport him out of the ship quicker.
Let's get to Aphelion and move away.
And so the day has truly now been saved.
Thanks to
But
Ratchet
what about all
Clank
the innocent-
PM.
What about all the innocent workers in the ship?
They were robots anyway.
That makes it better.
I guess I shouldn't remind that part of the reason for the robot uprising in Free was... Well, okay, no, to be fair, that was mostly Nefarious who was spewing his BS.
Anyway, let's go properly to the Insomniac Museum, which is more white this time around.
We at the
Are you
Insomniac
finding-
Apple Store.
Welcome, weary space traveler, to the fabled Insomniac Museum. Come inside, kick off your hover boots, and feast your eyes upon all that makes up the Ratchet universe. Lost levels, forgotten enemies, tantalizing videos. It's all here in one place, ready to fuse your synapses into a tangled mess of smoldering goo. Yeah, here's the thing, for some reason, compared to the first Insomniac Museum, there's no real voice acting outside of one video that's showcased to you.
And welcome to the Apple Store.
Yeah, Liv's already said that.
I mean, I think it's the most apparent with this particular treehouse. Holy cow. Like, it's not just the white, now they got emphasis on the blue, too. And even this music sounds like something you'd hear on an Apple Store.
I don't know, it reminds me more of classic Spyro.
Yeah, I guess I can hear it.
Alright, let's see what we can check out.
I find it weird that they don't give a bit more of a cutscene to the post-game with Vorselon.
It's just a thing that happened. What the hell is your Agon doing?
Waiting for his turn, I guess.
Watching a black screen, huh?
Oh god, he's too far gone.
An FX test to showcase the slow-mo effect in the time bubble.
I'm guessing the requirements to unlocking this are the usual, find, you know,
I think,
all of
okay,
the
don't
titanium
remember
bolts.
exactly this one, I'll check it again in the meantime, but if I calculate, it's about finding all the bolts. Fundamentally, a Ratchet level can be thought of as an exploration of a sci-fi world that is densely packed with a variety of fun interactions and mechanics uses. These activities themselves are separated out into what we refer as setups, each its own micro-story of things conspiring to obstruct Ratchet's progress before they are overcome by the player. These obstacles can be things such as enemies trying to defeat Ratchet, navigational problems, or simple puzzles that must be solved. Each of the setups should be treated as its own little micro-game that should be interesting, fun, and provide the right amount of difficulty and challenge. They should vary the pacing, dangers involved, and what skills and techniques are needed to successfully overcome them.
Interesting. So, well, you know, that's a good design philosophy to have.
Enjoyable setups alone are not enough, and good use of environment is necessary to sell the world as a whole. In order for this to happen, the designer must have a good understanding of what the world and how it functions. This means investigating the world to learn about its ecology and architecture. The environment should increase the fictional value of a product and make the player want to find out more about the universe. In terms of pure gameplay, it should provide obstacles and scenery that fit naturally and complement the mechanics. It is also critical to involve representatives from design, art, and programming during the process. This enables the designer to bounce ideas off peers, to gain the perspectives of the other disciplines, and to understand their wants and needs. Basic level design. It's kind of a lost art, believe it or not, but, you know. There are core principles behind the level design of Ratchet & Clank. An emphasis on fun, not realism or simulation. Worlds are highly saturated with color, a sense of exploration, adventure and wonder. Fun cartoon violence combat, non-realistic. The key to successful level design is the interweaving of gameplay mechanics and grounding the player in the fiction of the world. As designers, we must seek to create a perfect synergy between the two.
Basically, make sure that the level flows well, keep it fun. Don't overemphasize difficulty too much, just for the
well,
sake
not
of it.
necessarily, but you know, there's also the stuff about make it fun and non-realistic, even in its fictional violence. Like remember the cutscene where Nefarious shoots accidentally a book. You know, still treated as a killing, but you know, it's still cartoony. In this game, we will consider the following. Strong primary gameplay in the form of multiple missions and goals that emphasize exploration in addition to platforming and combat. Integrating the story and gameplay to provide a supporting fiction for the reused space and making the environments feel more meaningful. compelling secondary gameplay in the form of optional missions, secrets and rewards that take Ratchet to the corners of each map, layouts that allow, when possible, Ratchet to tackle objectives in any order and/or multiple different angles.
It's interesting to consider if these were notes they legit made for game development, or if these are kind of like an edited curating of the notes that they made for development to be better digestible for people who actually play this game.
Ah, there you go. Unlocking the Insomniac Museum in this game is actually very easy, Jova. You just need to defeat Lord Vorselon after acquiring all the zonies. So it's actually one of the easier ways to complete this. The end of the first trip to Vorselon's ship originally involved traversing an escape rocket, hurling through space with Vorselon in the nose cone. The player would start at the bottom and have to negotiate a gravity boot path peppered with obstacles. The hook here was that the rocket was dropped in section off, starting from the bottom up, just a multi-booster rocket. The player would reach the nose cone and Vorselon would escape. There's some iteration we learned by the amount of time and work into polish segment would bleed into too many important aspects of the game, and sadly this rocket ended up going nowhere. Oh well,
Alas.
It happens.
I don't know if we've covered this, but have we ever gone over what's your favorite treehouse in the series?
Museum, Jova. The treehouse was there for high impact.
Museum.
I mean...
But you get what I mean, though, right?
Any of them are fine. Like I said, I'm always a sucker for, developer interviews and stuff like that. So, a lot of the zoning structure used very large, round eyes as an architectural theme. Look around for hints of zoning history. The Bregu system is a mysterious and enchanted place. Time behaves strangely, and there are many bizarre phenomena. It is home to the Zoni, a race that was once worshipped and now thought to be mythological. It's a section of the galaxy that feels both beautiful and haunted. The worlds are overgrown, alien vegetation grows rapidly and has invaded the architecture and taken over main structure. The worlds have both artifacts created by ancient Zoni worshippers and inferior technology constructed by Zoni. There's romantic beauty to these worlds. Streams of sunlight, puffy clouds, rolling hills and golden sunsets can be found. There are also haunted woods, gnarled trees, and spooky mist that gives the location an eerie and mysterious tone.
So this was basically supposed to be a fairy tale-esque world.
More like mythology, as mentioned. Oh shit. Hello, team? Help.
Game devs.
There you go. Just spray some honey. It's fine. Remember, those are the ones from the system that was inspired by Resistance 2. I think we're gonna get an entry that actually mentions that directly.
No wonder they were having development issues. They had to deal with swarms of locusts that wanted to eat them alive.
You could say, Jova, they were riddled with bugs.
Yeah.
So maybe this is why all the devs are missing. The bugs ate them, and what we're looking at is the abandoned ship, essentially, of those brave devs who worked to deliver us this video game.
Here's something that was discarded away. More hover boost speed courses in the vein similar to the ones of the hover bike of the previous games. Yeah, you might have noticed. After saving Creel Canyon from the Argonians' invasion, we wanted the player to be able to interact with the townsfolk they had saved and open up some options collection quests. The area at the top of the canyon was fully completed, but we ran into problems with the level memory. There was just too much stuff in Creel Canyon, and after a while the game started crying real tears trying to make it run. PS3. We had spent a lot of time on the battlefield and tried to simplify the area to get the level running. Some of the things we planned, including overboost chases for zoning, a tetramite puzzle, and an optional mission to put out fires of bollards. So, yeah. Alright, let's check out if I recall correctly the cubicles. With every design, whether it's a gun, spaceship or NPC character, the main focus should always be the silhouette read. If the character works from a distance and remains iconic, then the character has a good chance of being successful design. Iconic silhouettes are memorable, which in a stylized platformer is very important. Which, yeah, it's a good thought process, because that was kind of the problem that all of the PS3 eras had about having generic white guy in his 30s with a relatively small haircut, standing, from behind with a shotgun usually.
You can thank Call of Duty for setting that meta.
If Insomniac's headquarters really look like this, everything looks so similar. I'm surprised the devs will know where to go to their desk.
Retro appliances and Art Deco furniture has the clean line with visual functionality featured in almost every Ratchet Clank character asset. The main reasons that these forms lend themselves well to the franchise are the large surface areas that are complemented by the small clusters of detail. In most cases, it will be small clusters of tech, but this will also apply to organic forms like creatures and, well, more creatures.
To its credit, there are some variation in some of the rooms with what they hold and whatnot.
Like other crate types, the Dimension Crate is triggered by damage being inflicted upon it. Once damaged, the crate implodes, then explodes into a frame large enough for Ratchet to walk through. The inner part of the frame fills in with a portal to the bonus dimension, which Ratchet can see a preview of the image of. Stepping into the portal will warp Ratchet to a randomly generated bonus challenge. Completing or failing the challenge warps the player back to the portal entrance. If the player succeeds, the portal implodes. If they fail, they can jump back in for another try. Again, it was a thing that was discarded. This, for example, these boxes. The dice crate will cycle between ammo, bolts, health, no reward, and explosive states. If the player timed it right, they could get whatever they needed most of the time by striking it when the appropriate icon flashed up. Unfortunately, there were a lot of minor polish issues to address, and players couldn't really figure out what the symbols meant. It was a relatively low-cost interaction. You only got a few bolts, a little health, or took a little damage, and ultimately we decided to cut it instead. Again, similar to the Crash boxes in 3, the ones that cycle between Wumpa Fruit Live, and TNT, usually. These creatures were a moon-specific race of squishy brain organisms in power suits. We were going to use the Drawfeed models from Tools of Destruction as a base. They will communicate telepathically whenever Ratchet approached them and use telekinetic ways to pull him in and attack, similar to the pressures in the arena. Our character team was overbooked and we decided to go with our existing Nefarious, Agorian and Feral enemies instead.
Basically it was to avoid the Spider-Man 3 problem.
Kinda. Well, it's more about species rather than any. Enemy variety is still pretty, clear in this. Time Cleaners are natural denizens of a great clock. They were created by Orvus to be used as temporal energy eaters. You may have heard him refer to them during his recorded message to Sigmund. While incapable of doing major time reconstruction, they are, unfortunately for Clank, able to devour and digest small temporal anomalies such as Clank's recorded selves and his time bombs. In their non-aggressive state, Time Cleaners are small, cute, playful creatures. However, when alerted to the presence of an edible time anomaly, they swell up to a vicious eating machine. And they're replaced with the slugs from Tools of Destruction. The Astrolab channel time energy, ribbons, through the major components in the Great Clock. It forms a large centerpiece in the middle of the Great Clock with several large time ribbons extending from it to the buildings along the play area. When we re-enter the Great Clock after Clank's awakening, the Astrolab is broken, spinning oddly, smoking and with broken time ribbons. When we return after Clank repairs part of the facility, it is fixed with fixed time ribbons attached.
I feel like some of this stuff...
When equipping the Grav Sphere, Ratchet is enveloped in a sphere of energy made up of hexagonal tiles. The whole state of a sphere is lightweight, and Ratchet's jump height is increased due to its light gravity. In low gravity mode, Ratchet can glide further, jump higher, and travel on objects that normally could not carry his weight. The Grav Sphere was a great idea, but the work it would have required to take it up to Insomniac standards would have taken away from other gadgets used more frequently throughout the game, like the overboots. Once those were in and working properly, it became clear we wouldn't be able to support 2 alternate modes of travel that you can activate anywhere, and so the Grav Sphere went the ways of a Kragmite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the stuff would kind of come back and, well, rift apart, ironically.
Babel Horde was a gadget used to hack throughout doorways by communicating with nefarious troopers. We also wanted the player to talk to some of them using patterns of flashing lights. When we reached the implementation stage, we realized how much design work would go into creating all of these sequences. Since it really boiled down to timing-based minigame without the humor of a pirate hologizing tools of destruction, we ultimately decided it wasn't worth it. So that's why there's no hacking minigame in this.
Interesting.
This is actually, yeah, Parkour we're about to, yeah, this is actually the weapon that I think, that I kind of feel sad that it wasn't there. The Phoenix launcher was based on the Predator missiles from Tools of Destruction. Ratchet locks on the target and these fiery birds of prey will be released from the glove, circling around Ratchet's head. When Ratchet fires, all of the Phoenixes will descend on their target in a fire explosion. While this weapon looked phenomenal on paper, it ended up not being a player favorite. It took too long for the Phoenixes to get into position, and from a gameplay perspective they were exactly the same as Predator missiles, hence the decision was made to donate it to the museum and focused on polishing up their other weapons. Which, yeah, makes sense, but kinda wish I would still see that.
You know what would be funny is if they gave an entry on the making of the museum.
The Shotgun Shock was a submission to the My Blaster Assault Weapon Design Contest. While he didn't win the contest, he did win the art from one of our character artists. This is a quick version he whipped up just for kicks.
Huh.
It's wielded sideways because Ratchet is cool, I guess. The Razor Talons were energy blades designed to cut through enemies in close quarters. They were basically Razor Claws from Tools of Destruction, but as we were nearing the end of production, we lacked the time to add all of the cool attacks necessary to make this weapon fun. Therefore, we made the tough decision to cut the Talons. Which, to be fair, I can understand, and CQC weapons never particularly worked super well in the franchise. The one that I can think worked the best was the mace in Deadlocked/Gladiator.
I feel like, at the end of the day, you've already got the iconic physical weapon anyway with the Omni-Wrench. Like, just upgrade that, basically.
Agorians are dim-witted, warlike creatures who abide by an asinine warrior code which they make up as they go along, usually to suit their own purposes. They are known to conquer civilizations at the slightest provocation and operate a traveling coliseum known as the Agorian Battleplex. During the early days of Ratchet & Clank A Crack in Time production, we decided it would be fun to see the Brigus system as a sci-fi version of high school. The Agorians were designed as the Alphas, meaning they were the brawny, athletic bullies with limited mental faculties and a tendency to consume massive amounts of protein bars. Like I said, we'll also get a video talking about it. Dr. Nefarious and his gang of robots have invaded the Brigus star system, hoping to create a new dystopia where the villains rule the universe. Within, Dr. Nefarious has brought a flair of dramatic and over-the-top B-movie designs. Dr. Nefarious and robotic cohorts prefer presentation and dramatic flair over functionality. Which, yeah. All these characters are described in a 3D world, while still maintaining the qualities of a 2D world. Most of the deciding factors for having the clarity of a 2D design is where the silhouettes are clear. whether the internal details are easy to parse visually both from afar and from a closer viewpoint, and if the overall mood or personality of the asset can be read accurately on the first read. One great aspect of these designs is seeing the opposition of forms between two related characters. Even with the contrast between the characters maintain a unified style and look which keep them grounded in the same world, or universe, in Ratchet & Clank's case. Like, for example, yeah, Nefarious and the irregular Grunt. We vastly improved our surface and lighting. Specular highlights, the shiny reflections from nearby lights, have a lot more detailed and range of brightness and shadow. The tech team really pulled this one off. Now our skills can be slimer, our robot shinier, and our game looks more quote-unquote polished all around.
Oh, so that's why the lens flare is bright enough to blind a person.
And of course, let's not forget the fun factor with our characters. Often, when a character's personality is described, we lean towards archetypal design, which has been a staple for this franchise. Once in a while, we can take forms that are in direct opposition of the character's traits to allow the personality to be even more dramatic. The creature aspects of any given character have become more and more abstract, but like the tech, many of the designs are derivative of surface and form qualities of animals. The endless number of patterns, rhythms, and anatomical structures can add to the sense of believability. This idea of believability is hugely subjective and should be stretched as far as it can go. The question to ask about any asset is, can I imagine that working?
Dude, it's a black
So
screen.
who is the Agorian warrior?
Hey there, congratulations on unlocking the behind-the-scenes video for Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time.
So this
My name is
particular
Brian
bit
Bernal, I'm
gets
the
a
project
video.
manager, and we're going to take you
Interesting.
around the office now and try to answer the question, who is the Agorian warrior?
When we first set out to
CJ
create all the
Griezmann.
different factions in RCF2, we decided that
Yes,
we
I was
wanted it
seeing
to
what
be,
he looks
in a
like.
lot of ways, almost like a version of high school. You have the Arachnoids who are kind of the geeky IT guys that kind of sit off in their own little table in the cafeteria.
Do we know any girls? Who needs girls when you have pizza and a VG9800 game system?
And then you've got the cool guys, the Agorians, who are like the jocks who are always angry and bumping each other's chests and just, you know, downing energy bars.
They've been around for 3,000 years, as other races have recorded them.
There's a lot of
and they
emphasis for
haven't
the
evolved at all.
Agorians, given that
All
they
do is fight.
kind of don't have that much presence in the story.
It's a faction that is against you occasionally, but not because they're working with the
You
family.
will pay for your incompetence with your lives. We realize that every time you wish death upon us, it is because you care.
You know, me and Brian Algar, we wrote up a whole character breakdown of all like the character traits that we wanted, and we wanted them to be very honorable creatures, and we want to have this code of ethics that always kept changing. And then, you know, we took that, we showed it to the artists, and we had Greg Baldwin and Dave Girton start sketching different things up. They came back at us with some really funny stuff, and that's when it got sent over to the animator. So we tried to give it like enough of an outline where everyone had a large canvas to work from, but we still wanted to leave a lot of room for people to put their own stamp on it.
It's a what now?
So at
Concept
Insomniac, when we
design.
start designing an enemy, we start creating these rough sketches and diagrams. We'll typically use a program like Illustrator where we can kind of create our little maps, create diagrams of what the characters might look like. And so with the Agorians, we wanted to have different ranges of combat because we knew at that point the player would have a lot of weapons. They'd have like a sniper rifle style weapon, and some mid-range weapons, and some short range. So that's how we designed the enemies. Here we got in the front, we've got these more mid-range bombers. We've got the melee guys that are going to run up close into battle, and then of course we've got the guys that ride the beasts in the background. And these were, you know, obviously the generals. They were the leaders of the group that the players had to hunt down.
It's alive!
Alive!
Modeling
Usually
an
for
image.
us, it's good enough just to have a drawing that really kind of captures the feel of the character, and it's up to us just to interpret that and put that into 3D. For this model, we had
This
about
is
maybe a week and a half to
2009,
really get
and they were
the
still
high-res
using
down
those old
before we started
ass
going for the actual game assets.
monitors.
And once that's all done, it's sent on to Rig and the animators, and then we get a living, breathing character that you're going to see in the game.
My process is and then I go out, I shoot some reference, do some sketches based on
also, cool
observing,
thing, similar to all of our things, the references are done via character actually, people actually performing them and, basing around those.
Not quite motion capture, but
well, if you
year of it,
again, if you know
basically.
anything about the recent chapters of Deltarune, you know exactly that this kind of thing is still done these days.
And then someone walking by sees a guy on the roof and is going,
And
"Is
so
he
I can use
okay?"
my mirror to get that.
Lives, you've seen enough video on Caddicarus to probably think that his neighbors do that all the time.
Kind of wave.
Yeah, it's
Honestly,
like that eye toy
Here in
video
Insomniac, it's
where
painfully obvious
he's
that
doing the
everyone
last
puts a
one
little
video,
bit
but it
of
looks like he's
themselves
doing
into every character that they work on.
you know what,
Initially,
salute
they
to
had
people
me
walking by his
wanted
house.
to animate specifically to growl sound effects. So I growled and yelled and made myself hoarse one day, yelling in my office.
Of course, I drew on my experiences in high school because I was...
I don't know, I think those grunts were sounded okay enough. I don't know why they just put them in the game.
This Ogorian warrior resembles me a little bit.
Guess they wanted
but,
to give some voice actors a shot at it.
Yeah. I couldn't even keep a straight face doing that one. I definitely wasn't the IT guy.
I don't draw inspiration from people at the office necessarily. So as far as
is that something you're just saying for legality's sake?
You know, I couldn't really say. I don't know.
And then that guy just weirded out everyone in the office and they all went home.
I mean, I
So
could say
that's why
something
I
else,
guess-
but it's way too inflammatory, so let's move on.
So I guess that's why that Agorian was so excited to watch that video, because he knows it's about them.
We've always wanted to give Ratchet some more acrobatic moves to highlight the Lombax's animal nature. One idea was to give him a series of climbing and swinging moves to climb vertical and horizontal poles in environment, pipes, scaffoldings, etc. With the amount of custom animation required for what was basically a complex jumping puzzle, we decided to cut out Ratchet's pole moves. Which, yeah, I
They
can
call
see
those
that.
Angela moves, I wonder. It makes me wonder if there was like a character called Angela who they were planning to give them to.
Nope, not done yet. I accidentally went through the exit. The procedurally generated arena is a virtual set of platforming obstacles originally intended as one of the Battleplex lobby games. When activated, the generator would produce a series of platforms and hazards for Ratchet to traverse in a timed challenge. The player would also get a number for that challenge, and, if they liked it, they could enter that number into the generator to play it again. The number could also be sent to a friend for them to try out. Ultimately, there were too many potential testing, lighting, and generation issues with a huge number of possible combinations, so we decided to cut the generator from the game. Again, if you know any roguelikes, you know exactly how this works, but they could not implement it because you guessed it, it would have been too complicated. Again, PS3.
Again, I feel like some of these things that got cut out would be brought back in a much more future game like Rift Apart.
Would have been probably very ambitious, this kind of thing, because it needs to generate an entire obstacle course from scratch using, properly the elements of the SNC. The reason we saw roguelikes, popping up since the PS4 era onward is mostly because it's actually easier with the architecture to actually produce titles like that. There were some early examples, even in older generations, like Nosferatu, the Wrath of Malachi, believe it or not, but those were more like weird beasts more than anything.
There's also virtual highlight.
The Nefarious Destroyers were larger versions of the common Nefarious fighter ships and would dock with the fighters to increase their strength and available moves. The destroyer would launch a volley of Seekers and try to dock with a pair of bombers. If the bomber's docking is successful, a wave of energy will build up along the edge of a ship's hull and fire away from the ship, sending a crescent-shaped wall of energy towards the target. The destroyer would then pull up and out of the fight, returning to the attack pool until the time came to make another pass.
I think of the museums, this feels the most organized in a way.
There is also the one, remember, the 2016 game reimagining also has one, but I don't remember exactly how it is like, so I cannot make a comparison just yet.
All in due time, but I feel like, again, of the ones we've looked at so far, this feels like it balances, both the fun factor of the museums while also organizing them in, a procedural enough way. The most.
I guess, although I can tell that in terms of, navigation, probably other ones were a bit better to navigate through. The Apple Store, aesthetic really hampers it a bit, admittedly.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was A, they wanted to try something a bit new, while also B, trying to make it so that they could basically deliver us the info.
The woman's bathroom has the cameras that follow you around. What the hell?
Okay,
and the man's bathroom have a photo of a photorealistic cat that shoots lasers. What?
It looks like it's staring into your soul.
No, Dweebs, I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to chalk it up that they made these while on drugs, and when they sobered up, they realized, my god, what have we done? And decided to
the one thing that I take from all of this is that the bathrooms at Insomniac at this time should have been closed. All of them.
Jesus Christ. And there's no Bioware explanation for those.
Nope. Oh, there's Azimuth.
That's weird.
Okay, here's some of the discarded overboots, speed courses that you probably would have gone through with Azimuth. Again, I've never been a fan of these, so I'm not particularly saddened by their loss.
It's as if Asimov is alive and back with us.
Sure.
He's now in heaven, aka the Dev Room.
The Lombax Heaven, yes, for sure.
Lombax Heaven is the real-world game Dev Room. Because, as it turns out, Lombax has actually created these games with their genius intellect. That's right, they were such big geniuses that they were able to pop out of the game world before the games even existed and develop the games to allow their worlds to... that happened.
Well,
but it allowed their worlds to exist.
Or maybe, put it more simply, this is just, the story. The Lombax is making an actual product based on one of them. I wouldn't be too surprised if if the next game gets to be really the final one, and it's about, finding again the Lombaxes. I wouldn't be too surprised if one of the final things being told is the fact that all of the franchise as being a product that the Lombaxes made to chronicle the events, that led Ratchet Clank to that moment. Our hoverboots racetrack was one of the major features of the Agorian Battleplex. We had races in some of the past Ratchet & Clank games, but we haven't had any in a while, and it seemed like a good time to give it another go. Our hoverboots were shaping up to be a fun mechanic, but it quickly became clear that getting the races up to the standards of the rest of the game was akin to making another fully featured game on top of a cracking time. What's featured here are a few variations of our existing track, with a simple version of Azimuth hovering along a path. You slow down and speed up based on how far he is from the player, but you're really just racing the clock and trying to stay out of his way.
Now fly through these rings.
Classic, rings that give you a boost. We've seen these all over the place. Or in this case, a timer boost.
Solve my maze, Ratchet.
Well, there's no time to waste. Whoa!
Lex for working with Nefarious.
Not really compatible. Lex prefers. Remember, Lex prefers to work with people who are not too overly shouty. Sure, occasionally he did work with the Joker, but most of the time his secret society of supervillains tended to employ people like Grodd, the Vandal Savage, and so on. Okay then.
It would appear that we have now fallen outside of the world already.
Clank, I keep falling through the geometry. How could this be?
Basically, the rules of our universe no longer apply.
Tetramites were actually based on a similar flying swarm enemy from Resistance 2 TM. We wanted them to crawl along the ground and eat Brigus nectar or anything else that got in their way. We are always looking for ways to create new creatures that are part of the environment instead of just another enemy plopped down in a spot for no reason. Hunters will make a creative use of our gadgets, add to the puzzle elements of Ratchet, and make the gameplay more diverse. When you can buy and wear any type of armor before a pre-rendered cutscene, we have to render a different version for each type of armor, or the cutscene will match what is wearing when you go back into the game. If you play previous Ratchet games, you may notice that Ratchet does not appear in any of the pre-rendered cutscenes. In-game cutscenes work because we can do a check on which armor you bought and display it in the scene. In this game, we wanted our pre-rendered cinematics to help tell the story, making it more personal. Our solution was to give Ratchet special armor that he can deactivate before a pre-rendered cutscene. This allows you to upgrade your armor and still see Ratchet's sensitive side up close and personal. Good to know, I guess. I still prefer what the previous games did, where where the armor, stick around during most cutscenes, but, considering I did not like the helmet of this one.
Also, dude, the game's done. You don't need to keep working.
When we first started out on Tools of Destruction, we had a plan to use the new console's processing power to create a more detailed model of Ratchet that would have more human facial features and expressions. We went with this concept probably before thinking, you know what, that's not Ratchet anymore. The model was changed to a higher resolution version of the style of a classic Ratchet. Imagine, thinking that a new HD jumping, requires a complete redesign of the character. That would be just silly.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone actually going through with that.
The worst part is that it's not even the one case I can think of, like a lot of things. A big part of Ratchet is blowing stuff up. We can design objects to break apart, create new objects, or shatter in unique and interesting ways. The strength, weight, and force of explosion can be modified to get the right feeling. Yeah, I was using one constructor version that had, the capabilities of a bouncer, basically. Explosive and shatter into small explosive and impact. Rigging is the process of adding joints to an object and setting it up to use one of our gameplay classes. Classes determine how an object behaves in-game. We have enemy classes, destructible classes, and many more. One type of class is a wrench grapple platform. By rigging up joints in a specific way and using this class, we can create a platform that Ratchet can move along a path, in 3 dimensions, and so forth. So let's go here instead. When it comes to showing functionality, many of the most successful joints and articulation systems come from actual machinery. This allows the exaggerating and outlandish design to be grounded and provides a trace of plausibility. This helps the player suspend disbelief and remain immersed. Implausible functionality often leads to, yeah, right, or that could never happen, even though they just blew a spaceship through the solar system to get to that enemy segment. Basically, you know that quote from George Wood that says, so much for realism? Like, imagine something like that but more justified. Ratchet's crouch maneuver has been consistent throughout the series. With a new wrench tether and hoverboot gameplay, it seems like crouch was taking up too much real estate on the controller. Ratchet isn't really the type to hide behind cover and pop up to take shots at his foes. He's more likely to jump into battlefield with guns blazing. As an alternative to crouch, we have the new wrench ready position to show the player they're winding up for a wrench throw or a kinetic tether move. The downside, no more squatting on fouled enemies.
A virtual boy?
No, we already talked about that previously, and it was basically the retro aesthetic, the 50s, 60s sci-fi general aesthetic.
Of course.
Ratchet, have you ever considered how we might end up leaving this universe? Because I do not see an exit sign.
Actually, there was an elevator. We actually accidentally risked to get there before.
Wouldn't it be funny if it turns out the reason that there are groins hanging out here is because they are actually the trapped souls of devs who gave their lives to this game?
Yeah, so the Ratchet Clank creepypasta, sure.
Thank you for that, Mr. Italian disembodied voice.
The nefarious space station originally had a set of puzzles based around the security grid. If the player threw a time bomb, they would be able to navigate a path of panels to the other side. In our focus test, lots of people were trying to jump over the panels, which wouldn't work, or reportedly take the dead end path without watching where it went. If they made a wrong move, the puzzle will send them back to the beginning of the puzzle. This caused many players to throw their controllers at us and shout some horrible things we don't mention here. The difficulty in communicating the rules of this puzzle in a reasonable amount of time, as well as the numerous head injuries received as a result of prone controllers, convinced us to cut the puzzle. God, it's just like that fucking Half-Life 2, I think, test that where Valve mentioned in an interview that they believed that, focus test groups were not capable of actually, going through a specific direction and were always looping around the same segment, so we cut away an entire branching path as a result. Like, I get it about trying not to make the frustration of the player a thing, but at the same time, I think that a lot of times it goes back on the other side and, treats them like everyone is an idiot.
I feel like, like many things, there needs to be some balance, essentially. Like, yes, not everything works off from the get-go, but that doesn't mean you should throw out the baby with the bathwater.
You know what's the best part? I can basically mention this now. I will mention it sometimes in the future, because why not? This kind of argument, believe it or not, this is just a simulator of battling between Argonians and nefarious forces, so don't worry about this. And also an enemy view simulators, I think. But so this kind of argument was started properly, at the very least, on the PS2 era by From Software, of all people. Back when they were making a game, a particular game, you don't need to know the title because they made a lot of games back then on the PS2. In one of their interviews, they did mention about the growing difficulties of the developing hardware, with the increasing quality of graphics, and complexity of game programming. Not to say that it was a detriment to them, but they felt like it would potentially be for the player. And that game's, I think, director, it wasn't the Attack Miyazaki Mario, someone else, made a specific example comparison by saying, let's say the player finds a treasure chest. Now, if the game has to be, going through this direction and the quality constantly gets increased, the treasure chest will actually risk to blend into the background because it will actually have to look more realistic and then therefore not immediately viewable, from a glance compared to what I did in previous games. Basically, this person back in the, mid-2000 tops, completely predicted the whole rise of the over-excessive yellow painting on everything in gaming these days.
Goodness gracious.
The Nefarious Carrier is a large ship that launches waves of fighters and bombers to defend an objective. They can dock with the smaller ships to put up shields for the central dome, which acts as a weak point and a large beam weapon. When the dome is shattered, the ship's brain is revealed and swarms of small enemies will emerge, encircling the carrier and defending it from a Aphelion. In general, a large capital ship gameplay did not pan out as we'd hoped, and the destroyers were converted into the Valkyrie boss ships. There were too many issues with attacking a static object in space. Players were constantly ramming into it, getting into position for a run, or struggling to fire it in a limited amount of time. Which, as I said, I think we said a couple of times, when it cropped up in the past, it's not bad in itself, but it should be really relegated as an accessibility feature for people who really have a trouble actually distinguishing elements of the background. People with, viewing impairment, like Shirai, for example. That is understandable, but my god, I'm pretty sure, the average person who picks up a controller normally wouldn't need that, but I'm digressing. We originally planned to support Ratchet Swimming as we have in other titles, but in the end we decided to focus more on his faster paced run and gun gameplay. Also, our new water is very cool looking on the surface, but we haven't dedicated the time to get the underwater look to match the surface quality.
Alas.
Alright, I think we're almost done. The color data of a character should hold up as simple blocks of color from a distance on every asset. When too much grit and detail is added to the main forms of a character, as the character moves further from the camera, it becomes difficult to parse visually. An asset should have distinct first read and second read levels of detail. The different materials, glass, rubber, metal, skin, should be consistent throughout the entire game. These consistencies help unify the look of the universe and add the toy appeal of the franchise. It also helps to unify the entire character effort, making the game more polished. Stay away from too believable for a texture surface. Photo referencing texture data can cause a break in style. Stylized and hand-designed surfaces are far more relative to the franchise. Which, yeah. And to be fair, even in games these days, this principle is still attained. Like, for example, even in the new God of War games, despite Kratos, having his skin covered in the ashes of his wife and child, and, potentially blending in with the snowy environment, his red war paint, makes him very stand out, even, in a relatively white background. Our tech department gave us a new tool, the ability to attach objects with physics to each other. The result is more organic than our previous tool, which had us creating objects with the attachments built in. We also have more control over how the objects break. Anyway, physics, because why not? Thankfully, since this is not an FPS of the mid-2000s, this is not translated by having a basketball court, because every single FPS back then wanted to have that to showcase, look how our physics work.
What on the football pitch?
Sorry, dweebs. This is an early design for the teleporter moon. The basic concept was to litter the moon with teleporters and force the player to find the correct path to get the reward at the end. Before this design was implemented, there was already concern about being able to orient yourself and find your way across the moons, and this design made that flaw even more apparent. Now we had a moon where you didn't know where you were, where you're been, or where you're supposed to go, and there were practically no visual indicators to help you out. After watching multiple people run around in circles, it became painfully obvious that having multiple paths just led to frustration and confusion. So we decided to cut down on the paths and focus more on the gameplay aspect of a moon. I guess maybe it's because the basketball represents a level of physicality on a vertical level. When instead of football, there is still a level of, physics to be had, trajectory, speed, and so on. It operates mostly on a horizontal level, while a basketball probably has a, three-dimensionality kind of deal. So I can believe that. Alright, time for some polygon comparisons, actually. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the museum. This is Ratchet's old model, with 6912 polygons. His head and hands are a bit big, a bit larger, which makes him look a little younger. I miss his potato face. Look at him.
Look at him without a care in the world, not
this new version of Ratchet has 9,435 polygons and 253 joints. He's got a trimmier waist and more delicate features that let us create more expressive and subtle actions. The high definition era lets us make more and more realistic characters. Ratchet's case, we can make our stylized character more believable without sacrificing his exaggerated designs. I still think the potato face was lost a bit in the process.
I guess I can kind of get the mentality they were going with, though. Like, to their credit, it seemed more that they wanted to edit him so that, they could do more with the design as opposed to just making it more realistic, which, the potato face is a bit of a sad loss, but I'm fine with it for us being able to do more with his face, I guess, if that was their reasoning.
The Stellar Leviathan was the ultimate evolution of the Leviathans from Tools of Destruction. These spacefaring creatures would travel in packs like sharks and circle Aphelion, using telekinetic tractor beam to pull it in and chomp down on it with a massive bite. We could not get the animation system for the Leviathan going again. He used a procedural animation to undulate its body in Tools of Destruction. We needed the time to get the core space combat working, and therefore had to cut him. The original version of the hypersonic brainwave scrambler was smaller and more reminiscent of a certain pesky droid from another galaxy far, far away. The HBS was so destructive to the Great Clock that we needed to beef it up to a larger shape. That way it could smash through walls and be a little easier to identify from a distance. Which I agree, it's a bit too small, and the color black would have made it stand out, but not so much. Oh, there's someone outside. Let's end with this by going to see who that is. It's Dan. R.I.P.
There you go! You
come here often?
The man. Let us stand here and ponder the meaning of existence together.
And I think that's a good point to actually end this. So, next time I will probably give that dreaded summation of the comic 6-issue miniseries. Possibly with some images to accompany that, but I will not divulge myself too much about it. And when we'll get back to the franchise, it will be with the next proper gaming installment, All for One. So see you for that.
Yeah.